Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first Politics of Disability Roundtable, Disability and Ableism. My name is Mary Fashik, and my pronouns are she, her. I am the founder of Upgrade Accessibility, and I will be the moderator for the roundtable discussions. Content warning for today include ableism, racism, and death. It should be stated that the opinions expressed by the panelists are solely their own and do not necessarily reflect my opinion as the founder of Upgrade Accessibility. Before we begin today, we would like to take a moment to acknowledge with the utmost respect the land that we all occupy. Today is the traditional and ancestral home of many indigenous peoples. The land known as Turtle Island by many indigenous peoples was stolen and renamed North America by white colonizers who destroyed lives along with a way of life. Please take a moment to consider the legacies of violence, displacement, and settlement that bring us here together today. We must practice this education and inclusion as we recognize our own history, responsibility, and commitment to displaced and colonized people everywhere. We will now begin with panelist introductions, and I will begin with Deanna.
Thank you so much, Mary, and thank you for this platform. Hi, everyone. My name is Deanna Yadollahi. That's spelled Y-A-D-O-L-L-A-H-I. I have shoulder-length hair that is curly. I have light brown skin. I like to start saying that I have eyes each the size of a planet. I'm very comfortable in my navy blue couch in front of a window that is closed. And I am wearing pajamas as a political statement that we should show up as we are, even in quote unquote professional spaces. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I am also an unwelcome guest on the traditional unceded ancestral territory of the Gabrielino or Tongva and Kizh people within so-called Southern California. And I support the Land Back movement. I am a disabled, gender nonconforming person. I am MAD and neurodivergent. Check out MAD Pride movement if you're not familiar with the MAD identity. I identify as a disability justice activist and justice producer. And I'm extremely passionate about bringing access to others in a way that is access intimate, as Mia Mingus writes about. And I'm really passionate about amplifying disability justice as a movement and framework. Thank you. Check.
Thank you so much. We will now move on to Jules for their introduction.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jules Good. I am a late deaf, neurodivergent, disabled, all of these things person. I use they, them pronouns. And just a quick image description of myself. I am a white person with very short brown hair that's kind of spiked up into a mohawk and shaved on the side. I'm wearing a floral print shirt, and I'm in a room that has gray walls and some artwork behind me. It's kind of hard to see what the details are anyway from this view. And I am I have a kind of a lot of different roles at the moment, but I am the founder and consulting lead at Neighborhood Access, which is an accessibility consulting firm that seeks to help organizations make their presence, processes, and practices more accessible to the disabled community. I'm also in my last semester of graduate school at the University of New Hampshire, finishing a master in public policy. And I recently joined Northeast Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services as their relay outreach coordinator, coordinating just adaptive and assistive technologies for folks who are unable to use traditional telecommunication devices. So that is a little bit about me. I'm super excited to be here with all of you and looking forward to a great discussion. So thank you.
Thank you, Jill. We'll move on to Sean.
Hi, today I'll be voicing for Sean. Hello, my name is Sean Gold. My pronouns are he and him. I'm very excited to be part of the panel today. I'm an advocate for people with disabilities, and I have one Microsoft certification for web design. In 2020, I was elected as president of the disability-owned nonprofit organization Coalition in Truth and Independence. My debut book should be out in April.
Thank you so much, Sean, and thank you, Brandon, for being here to help with access needs today. We'll move on to Julie. Julie, would you like to be referred to as Dr. Williams, or would you prefer your first name?
I prefer Julie. Thank you for asking, though, Mary. And hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for having me. I'm Dr. Julie Williams, and I'm joining you from Montana. And quick image description, I am a white woman with dark brown hair, mid chest length, tortoiseshell glasses, navy blazer, and floral patterned shirt. And in the background, there are white walls, a painting of some cactuses in the desert, and two plants on either side of me. And I received my PhD from the University of New Mexico in 2017. I continue to work there part-time. And I do a lot of advocacy work for the Multiple Sclerosis Society. I was diagnosed with MS in 2011, and that has been my access point into the disability justice movement. So I'm excited to be here and to participate in this conversation with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. And not to be left out, I will do an image description of myself. I am a Middle Eastern woman with short curly hair. I am wearing glasses. I am wearing a yellow orangey shirt. I'm sitting in a black office chair in a room with some paintings on the wall. We will now move on. Please note that all audience questions should be placed in the Q&A box, which is separate from the chat box. So if we are going to discuss ableism, we should begin with defining what ableism is. There's a popular definition which I'm going to copy and paste into the chat to make this more accessible for everyone, and then we will go from there. This popular definition was recently adopted by some in the disabled chronically ill community, written by Talia Lois. The definition reads as follows: a system that places values on people's bodies and minds based on societal constructed ideas of normality, intelligence, excellence, desirability, and productivity. These constructed ideas are deeply rooted in anti-Blackness, eugenics, misogyny, colonialism, imperialism, and capitalism. The form of systematic oppression leads people and society determining who is valuable and worthy based on a person's language, appearance, origin, and or their ability to satisfactorily reproduce itself and quote unquote behave. You do not have to be disabled to experience ableism. That last sentence is a loaded statement. However, Diana, I like to start with you because I know you believe that the community as a whole should adopt this definition. Could you please elaborate as to why?
Thank you for the question. I will start by saying that as a person who has evolved so much in my disability advocacy, the things that I advocated for at the beginning are much different than I advocate for now. And I really attribute that to an increase in access to information. So I'm really passionate about having these kinds of discussions with people so that we can meet people where we're at. And it just means that we really need to be open-minded, which all of us here today are. So I really love this definition. And when I engage with people about it, I find that there is confusion about it, criticism about it. And my response is that I think that ableism and disableism are different things. And I think that there is a great opportunity to further develop disableism in our community collaboratively. I also love that this definition has been updated multiple times by TL and Dustin Gibson and community members who have been collaborated with. I also feel like this definition is timely during our current socio-political society or times where we are, whether performatively or authentically, moving towards more efforts to be anti-racist. So TL talks about in a blog post that contextualizes a speech that TL gave, how ableism upholds racism and that the two are dependent on one another to survive. So I think that with this definition being separate from disableism and being something that not just disabled people experience is really important because it makes it prevalent to a lot of people and it makes it important to center in our anti-racist efforts as well as our other current advocacy and activism and learning and unlearning where we really need to, for example, center access and ensure accessibility of our movements and activism. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now ask Jules for their thoughts on this definition.
Yeah, thank you. I really like this definition. I think it really captures a wide variety of experiences that people in the disability community, have to go through. I think this idea of, society really, or this system placing value on, these ideas like desirability and normality, whatever that means, and especially productivity are things that I can definitely relate to and have experienced. I also think it's important to recognize that this system has, really real ramifications, as a lot of us really know. And one of those is that because we've, kind of met at the worst intersection of all of these different isms, we are in a place where we have basically pushed disabled people to the side for so long. And, back even 50 years ago, a lot of us were still just institutionalized or shut away in the house. And all of the development that's happened since that time, a lot of it has happened without our input or without thoughtfulness for our needs and experiences and desires. So I think it's just really important to recognize that even though this on its own is just a terrible thing to think about, it also has very real ramifications in the world, in every kind of aspect of disabled people's lives that you can think of. So yeah, I am very lucky to have gotten to work with Dustin Gibson a little bit this past summer, and he really just embodies what it means to have a true understanding of this definition and how to combat it. So I'm very glad that we're able to tie that into our discussion today.
Thank you so much. We will move on to Sean now.
We as a community, meaning the disabled community, have to we as a community, meaning the disabled community, have to continue to call people out on their prejudice, bullshit that they project on us that's ableist. Things such as taking the handicapped parking space when they don't have a sticker, or the handicapped bathroom stall just because it's the biggest one, or it's supposed to be the biggest one, I'll say. We still have inaccessible workspaces, buildings, even though it's mostly the older buildings, and hangout spaces that are not wheelchair accessible because of the stereotype that we don't live normal lives. So that's just on the environmental aspect. When we get into the desirability part, it starts to add up. If the spaces aren't accessible, we aren't seen. If we aren't seen, we can't bridge the gap between the able-bodied being in the world with us, and that leads to no romantic relationships. So it's like a failing chain reaction where one affects the next. And Sean also wanted to add that he liked the definition.
Thank you. Joy, your thoughts?
Hi, so yes, I think this is a very all-encompassing definition, and my thoughts on it are that my own life experience has kind of been in two realms. One is as an educator and the other is as an activist. And I found that there is different responses and different needs for how this is framed in those two different realms. So I think that as an educator, I believe we make the most impact meeting people where they're at. And I think a lot of the world is not ready or at the place to be understanding of that definition fully. And that's where we as activists in the disability justice movement have the work to do to get society to be in the place where they understand and are accepting of that all-encompassing definition. I basically want to echo what everyone has already said. And I think that for me as an educator and in the realm of academia particularly, but also within different activist circles, disability is so forgotten and left out that I think we have a lot of work to do to even get people to acknowledge that. Even other activists that are working for social justice so often overlook disability and accessibility and don't even know how to start to get there. It feels like that I think this is a great definition, but I also think that there's just so much work to do for society to be at the point where this is something that they understand and can accept. So.
Thank you, and I agree 100%. That is why we are having these discussions, because it feels as though if we are not the ones having and leading these discussions, then no one else will. And we will circle back around to this definition and education about ableism. We will circle back around to that at the end of our discussion today. We are going to take a quick 5-minute break just so everyone can take a few minutes and absorb everything we've discussed so far and have a quick water and or bathroom break, and we will reconvene in 5 minutes, which will be about 2:26 Eastern Standard Time. See you in 5 minutes. Okay, we will reconvene in just 1 minute. Welcome back, everyone. I'd like to ask each of you, the panelists, to share an aspect of your daily life in which you've experienced ableism, be it the education system, workforce, or medical field. I'm going to start with Joy.
Okay, so I think that I have two examples for that. The first one would be kind of the most directly stated example that I can think about this was, it's almost exactly a year now that I did some lobbying for the MS Society with the New Mexico legislature. And we were trying to get a bill passed to provide paid medical leave, which, as we have all seen over the course of the COVID epidemic, is greatly needed in our society. People need the opportunity to take leave for their own health or their loved one's health without the danger of losing their job. And I had a New Mexico lawmaker state directly to my face when talking with him about this, that he just wouldn't hire someone if he knew that they were likely to have to take time off. And my response to him was, that's illegal, that's discrimination, you by law cannot do that. And his response was, well, businesses need to make money. So that's one of the most glaring examples that I can think of, and just was so shocking to have someone be so upfront about that to me. But I think it also factors into our daily life in a lot of other subtle ways too. When I was first diagnosed with MS, my neurologist recommended that I did not disclose that to my employer because of discrimination like that. And so that was something that I didn't talk about in my department during my PhD program, because I was diagnosed the second year of my PhD program, and I didn't let anyone know for about 3 or 4 years. So I felt like I was living this secret life that was very complicated, extremely traumatizing, and nobody knew about it. So that for me caused a lot of emotional turmoil. And I eventually was just like, I don't care if there's discrimination. Nobody knows who I am or what I'm going through. And that's more important to me than potential discrimination, which I did receive a lot of when I started disclosing. And part of why I think people aren't ready for that definition is extremely well-meaning people in my department would try to be supportive in the way that they thought would be helpful, which a lot of times was extremely unsupportive. Like, one example is I had dyed my hair, and the head of my department was like, you know that hair dye can cause really bad results for people. Maybe that's what's going on with you. And just things like that, that I know a lot of that came from a well-meaning place, like caring about my health, but it just was so uneducated and so uninformed. And even though it felt really damaging to get the advice not to disclose, I can see why my neurologist told me that. And I think that as someone who entered disability later in life, it took me some time to get there. I didn't even identify as disabled for several years, and eventually realized that was because of internalized ableism. So that was a process for me, not just dealing with other people's views of it, but also finding that in myself and dealing with that.
Thank you. I wanted to touch on what you said about not disclosing your disability with your employment. And I think part of that is, as disabled individuals, we have no recourse when we are discriminated against in the workforce, because I myself complained to the EEOC and was told that if a business felt that I did not represent them the way they wanted to be represented, be it my speech impairment or that I use a wheelchair, that it was okay for them not to hire me. Blatantly okay not to hire me because of my disability, and I had no recourse. So you're right, it is, we have this fine line where it's, why do we have to hide who we are or our needs because of disability? But if we don't, then we don't move further in society. So thank you for sharing your experience. I'm gonna move on to Sean now.
Here's Sean's answer. Well, out of the 13 years that I was in school, and that's not including college, there was only 1 year that I experienced a really in-my-face ableist teacher. He was an older Black gentleman, but that's no excuse for him continuously having a lack of understatement that even though I'm nonverbal, that I could hear. This teacher would say things to my nurse instead of me. Mind you, this is high school, so there wasn't much that I could do anyway, and when I did, it was a problem, and it was too late because the school year was over. What's especially unfortunate for high school students, especially, that even when we speak up, hardly anything will be done. There were 2 teachers that were ableist towards me that year, but he was worse. The bothersome thing that I realized was unless it is an in-your-face, mean ableist or ableism that occurs, your complaint will never matter because at least they meant well.
And I always say, well-meaning ableism is still ableism. Deanna, I'm gonna pass it over to you.
Thank you. And I want to be really transparent. I'm internalizing some ableism right now about, so I'm diagnosed with OCD and I self-diagnose as being autistic. I have so many things I want to touch on, and I know for a fact I will not touch on certain things. So I'm really letting go of that. Thank you for being here with me during that. I think that, you know, there's been, so I think the most prominent forms of ableism for me are inaccessibility that is kind of radical in our understandings of things, such as the need to get rid of timed exams, the need to be flexible about deadlines, and also the assumptions that I am the recipient of in social relationships when I don't have access to information about social boundaries, when I violate social norms, and when my behaviors relating to disability are misunderstood as being intentional, lack of caring, lack of respect, you know, all of that. So I really advocate for people becoming more informed about transformative justice, specifically Mia Mingus's work about how to give a genuine apology and how to accept accountability. Because I find that I am commonly misunderstood and not given feedback and access to information that'll help me improve in that relationship, as well as the ability to repair harm. And I understand that that's a lot of emotional labor and nobody has to give that to me. But I do hope that people can start to assume a possibility that it's not intentional and that it's not relating to some kind of a moralistic thing. When I behave in a way that's odd, or I violate social norms or relationship boundaries. I definitely relate to the difficulties with internalized ableism, as well as ableism pushed on us, of people thinking that certain types of accessibility are impossible or too radical. I acknowledge that sometimes it's not appropriate to have recordings if it's a space, for example, where they're showing a film that has copyright, or you know, when it's a support group and there's huge confidentiality issues. But I'm finding during COVID for events, a lot of people aren't being charitable in thinking about how legitimate my needs are for having recordings for things after, and also advanced access to information before. I thank Mary because all of my access needs were met for this event. But I really experienced that form of ableism, as well as the relationship issues that, like, I find myself having to put out fires every single day about relationship issues. And if there were, thankfully the people in my life are very supportive. But when I try to start relationships with other people, it can be really difficult, and people can be kind of give up pretty quickly on me. And I attribute that to ableism and the expectations for being quote unquote normal and things like that. I have so much more to say, but I will just add that I forgot in my introduction that I'm getting a master's in disability studies. I thought that might be relevant. Thank you. Check.
Thank you so much. Jules, I know you're going to give your answer, but I'm also curious if you'll add on your experience as a white hard of hearing individual, how that has been for you navigating the education system.
Yeah, happy to. So, yeah, I guess for a little bit of context about me. So I was born hearing, grew up most of my life hearing, and then in college started really having issues understanding what was going on in class and just really being exhausted. And I went to the audiologist kind of on a whim, and they informed me that I had lost about half of my hearing in both ears. And that was 2 years ago. And I'm now severely to profoundly deaf in that range in both ears. So I have a very rapidly deteriorating hearing condition. And so it's been really interesting, you know, talking about ableism. I didn't realize how much ableism I've been putting up with until I started working in an all deaf, all signing office about 3 weeks ago. And not only just having my communication access needs met in this office where, you know, we can sign with each other, people have clear masks so I can read lips, and are very cognizant of making sure that my communication needs are met. But also just in a broader sense, thinking about accessibility at work, I didn't realize how rigid a lot of my academic and professional experience has been thus far, until I was allowed to work in an environment that was more flexible, and really until I started my own business and started realizing that I can get just as much, if not more, done by working the way that I want to work, right? So for me, sitting at a desk for 8 hours a day and just pushing through and doing one thing at a time really doesn't work for me. I recently have started putting the pieces of this together. I used to think I was just weird, or that I just was not trying hard enough, but I recently got diagnosed with ADHD. And now that I have treatment for that, I have just really started understanding, like, wow, it's not me. Like, I mean, it is kind of me, but it's really like, it's not just me, it's the way that I have to interact with all of these other systems that are in place. And so I, have really appreciated the opportunity to be able to, yes, have a lot going on and be very busy, but be able to kind of manage my schedule in a way that honors my time and my energy. As someone with chronic mental health conditions, and I'm sure, other people can relate to this as well, you have good days and you have really bad days. And when you have really bad days, it can be hard to kind of live up to the expectations of everything that society says we're supposed to be doing, and that we have to be on all the time, and we have to, not only go to work, but then come home and keep a clean house and cook and, have relationships and have friends and just everything that we're supposed to be doing. So it's definitely been an experience coming into disability culture and community a little bit later in life. But it has definitely, I related to a lot of what you were saying, Julie, like just having that internalized ableism and feeling like you have to hide this from people because you don't want to give people the impression that you can't function as well as you used to, or in the way that you think you're supposed to. And it's been really liberating to just say, like, yep, I have a disability, and like, this is what I need from you in order to make this work. And like, if you're not willing to provide that, then we're probably not gonna be able to work together. And it's really taken, a couple years for me to be able to like actually stick up for myself in that way and ask for what I need. And sometimes I still just default to, following the rules or just kind of like sucking it up. But yeah, it's been a really eye-opening experience, and one that's also made me have a lot more empathy, which I'm really grateful for. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox now, but this is a really interesting topic.
And that's what this is for us to have this discussion that seems to always be swept under the rug, and no one wants to look it in the face. I constantly say disability is messy. Disability does not fit in a nice, neat little box. And I've experienced with organizations that deal with disability and disabled individuals that they want to put disability and disabled individuals in a neat little box, but it's only so that they feel better about themselves. And it's to make disability more palatable. And disability doesn't need to be palatable. And if you think it's not, then that is not our problem. That is your problem. So yes, this is an important conversation, and I'm thankful for all of you who wanted to participate and wanted to be a part of this discussion. We are going to open up for questions now. This is a long question, so I will read it slowly. I am curious about the last sentence of the definition. See, I said we would come back to this. You do not have to be disabled to experience ableism. Is there concern that this could be co-opted by non-disabled people and lead to further erasure of disabled folks? Sort of related, I think the pandemic has made capitalism's unrealistic expectations of productivity visible to a lot more people. Do the panelists see the pandemic and the ways it has highlighted the crisis of capitalism as an opportunity for more awareness of ableism? So we'll take this one thing at a time. And yeah, I really want to start with you because this is the definition that I know you are campaigning for. So I'm really curious as to this. It says, is there concern that this could be co-opted by non-disabled people and lead to further erasure of disabled folks?
So I think what's really important for me to reiterate again is that disableism and ableism are very different things. Disableism is something that we can further expand collaboratively about things specific to disabled people. But also, even when we do that, we need to be really careful because some people are disabled and don't know that they're disabled. Some people literally cannot identify as disabled because of harm and generations of violence that they might experience in the home, or you know, some people like there's so many barriers to knowing that one is disabled and actually using services sometimes. So we have to be really careful about gatekeeping around that. But that's just to say that people can be disabled without actually being labeled disabled. I think that when it comes to ableism, like everyone, just like everyone benefits from accessibility, everyone also is affected by ableism because there's many people, disabled or not, who are quote unquote policed about the ways that they are, the things that they do, the ways that they appear, whether or not they're quote unquote productive, whether or not they quote unquote behave in a certain way. So I think that dismantling ableism definitely benefits disabled people, but not just disabled people, because ableism is insidious and something that we connect with white supremacy and hegemony and power and intersecting oppressions, such that a lot of people of color and other marginalized groups experience ableism without even having to have disability or knowing that they're disabled or what have you. So yeah, I think that, again, there's a lot of opportunity to be careful with it, but further develop disableism as discrimination against disabled people with the nuances that people don't have to know they're disabled or identify as disabled and things like that in order for that to be applicable to them. Thank you so much for the question. Check.
Thank you. Did anyone else want to respond? I know Sean, you wanted to respond. Anybody else would like to respond? Julie, and then we'll go to Sean.
Thank you. I want to address, I think, more of the second part of the question. I think Deanna did a really good job of addressing the first part in the qualifications that exist there. And the second part of that with the pandemic, I think, like I said in my answer with the example of ableism and the legislature who is involved with making laws, talking about how they would actively discriminate in paid medical leave. So when the pandemic first started, I was really hopeful that this would be an opportunity for society to understand more of the disability experience, to understand how important access to healthcare and other things are. And as it's dragged on, I have grown less hopeful. It's been hard for me to see people so desiring to just get back to normal, which I miss a lot of things about the pre-pandemic times, but it's been so disappointing to see that there's a lack of imagination to create change for how things could be better. I feel like there's just a push to go back to what was, and what wasn't working for so many people for so many reasons. Lack of access, like what we've talked about with capitalist work modes and productivity that aren't working for anyone. And I wish that we as a society would take this chance and seize on it to create a better world. I still have like this much hope that we'll do that, but I've got to say that as it has dragged on, it seemed just so obvious at the beginning that there needed to be changes made, and as time has worn on, it's become more obvious to me that we're just not there, and that it's extremely glaring, but we as a society are still not taking those steps because we're so embedded in capitalist culture that I think is really hard to extract ourselves from. That sort of monetized labor is so king in our culture, whereas like networks of care and different work modes and things like that we could be working towards more at this point just seem like they're still so far in this like misty vision of a utopia world that I thought that, I don't know, I'm always really hopeful. So I still, like I said, do maintain this much hope, but it has been a disappointing process to me as the pandemic has worn on. So.
I'll move on to Sean now.
Here's Sean's response. I actually liked the idea of everything being virtual. I actually tweeted about it last month. I said, I don't want to return to the ways of before the pandemic. Things were less accessible. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot that the United States doesn't care about the disability community. And if I may add to that, unlike Julie, I can't hide my disability because whether or not the able bodies know what it is, my trach around my neck immediately gives it away.
It's unique for me because I have both visible and invisible disabilities. So oftentimes my invisible disabilities get ignored because people only see my wheelchair or they only hear my speech. They don't understand that I live in chronic pain and have chronic fatigue and experience so many other things. So my disability is not just twofold, but it's multiple facets of my life. And oftentimes it's easy for people to dismiss and ignore my invisible disabilities because in some odd way, they're more comfortable with accepting that I'm in a wheelchair and I just need a ramp. So yeah, I'm in between like Julie and like Sean. Like Sean, I can't hide my cerebral palsy, but like usually I can have my chronic illness on certain days I cannot. So yeah, and I'm with you, Sean. I don't want to go back to what it was like before COVID. I've had so many opportunities because ironically we're in a pandemic that could, dare I say, kill a lot of us, but yet this thing that could kill us has given us a voice and given us opportunity. And that's the reality we're in. Jules, do you want to comment on either one of those questions?
No, I think folks pretty much said what I was going to say, so I'm good to move on. I'm pretty interested in the next one, so.
Okay. The next question comes from Amy. It said, I'd love to hear more about how folks have worked toward a better balance of advocating for more accessibility and accountability at home, work, medical settings, society, politics, while balancing their own health needs. So whoever would like to chime into that.
I will chime in first on this one. So this is something that I struggle with a lot because as much as it's amazing that so many things are online now because of the pandemic, and it makes it a lot easier to pop in and out of meetings because you don't have to worry about commuting. And at first I was like, oh my God, this is awesome. Like, I'm never going to miss anything ever again. And then like a month into the pandemic, I was like, why am I so burned out? Probably because I just work now 24 hours a day. Because there was no line between, for me commuting to school and work, when I would leave my office or when I would leave campus, I'd be like, okay, we're done with that for the day. Now it's time to transition into post-work, post-school mode. But with COVID, I've just been at home and find myself answering emails at 2:00 in the morning and all of that stuff too. So that's something I've really been working on. And so to actually answer your question, what I have found helpful in terms of balancing the advocacy work, and the constant kind of emailing back and forth and fighting that I'm doing with people about providing accommodations for various things, balancing all of that with just trying to stay alive and well-ish as a person. It's that I needed to find artificial ways to impose those boundaries on myself. And what I mean by that is, the example I gave earlier, driving home, that's a very real boundary, because you're leaving one physical space and transitioning to another. So at home now, what I try to do is I recently moved into a bigger space, so this will be easier, but I was living in a 180 square foot tiny house, a straight up tiny house. So my bedroom was my kitchen, was my office, was my leisure hangout space. And so I started doing something that I thought was really silly, which was when I was working, I would sit on one side of the couch with a certain pillow and a certain blanket. And then when I was in chillax mode, I would sit on the other side of the couch with a different pillow, a different blanket, which sounds wild, but it really worked for me in terms of just imposing some kind of boundary and trying not to blur the lines of work and relaxing and social time and all of this into kind of one just messy thing. And so, yeah, it's definitely challenging, and it takes a lot of practice to figure out how to get it right. But it is definitely a worthwhile process to go through for yourself, I would say.
I'm having the same challenge. I have a room in our apartment that is my office. This is the space that I work in. And I have to tell myself, once I leave this space, I am done for the day. No more work. That's it. And also, except for this weekend, I don't come in here on the weekends because I am not working. And it's very, very, very difficult to separate working from not working when you're in a room, when you're in space all the time. I have not left my apartment except one time a month for almost a year now. So it's very difficult. And you don't know what to, and also my work never stops. My advocacy never stops. I am constantly running upgrade accessibility. I have not yet found that boundary of when to stop posting for upgrade accessibility, when to take time to myself. I'm hoping to do so after today's roundtable. Putting together events. It's the continual advocacy work is exhausting, especially when you occupy one space all the time. I would like to open this up to anyone. Yes, Dana, go ahead.
Thank you. So there's a few things I wanted to touch on. First of all, Jules, what you actually like discovered for yourself has been backed up by psychological research. It's like a thing actually that you're supposed to do. You're supposed to have like a lamp or, something signaling for your environmental stimuli work, and then other things for other things. So it's funny that you came to that like creatively and on your own. That already exists as like a recommendation with research. Mary, something that you were talking about for me is, it reminds me of the fact that a lot of us don't actually choose to become activists or advocates, or to do so for ourselves. Like that's survival work. So the work never ends. And I do want to say that the burden shouldn't just be on disabled people, while our work should be amplified and centered. It's not just our responsibility. And people can start to, go into spaces that don't ask what access needs are. You can like let people know, hey, I recommend that you ask what access needs people have, because that's also not just for disabled people. For myself, I have, so with having OCD, which about that, like, please people stop saying that you're OCD about this and that. It actually has affected me to the point where I've lost a job. I didn't feel comfortable. I didn't feel taken seriously because someone did that to me. And that actually like prevented me from asking for accommodations out of fear that I wouldn't be taken seriously. And then because I was late to work so many times, I ended up being let go of. Well, there were a lot of other things that happened there, and yeah, it's complicated, but yeah, please stop saying that because it's very serious. Jules and I kind of have similarities, but also opposites of like OCD sometimes presents itself similarly to ADHD, but also I have like, I've been in a very serious depression for maybe the past 2 years. So what I have had to do actually is find supportive people in my life to have co-working sessions with during this pandemic. Wow, I just spat everywhere. So like we'll get on Zoom and we'll set an intention like, okay, like this is what we want to work on for ourselves. Sometimes the things that we work on are only self-care. Sometimes they're not capitalistic, quote unquote, productive things. but we hold each other accountable, because I find that I have a lot of avoidant tendencies, but I have so much that I'm passionate about and in theory want to do, including writing, including things that don't have deadlines, but could benefit from deadlines, while also being accepting of my lateness of deadlines. So yeah, I will just say that I'm also still trying to figure it out. And some days what I've tried to do has worked, and other days it has not. And I'm learning to be okay with that too. Thanks. Check.
Thank you. We'll move on to Sean now.
Sean's answer to this was, my care hasn't changed much since the pandemic. It is what it is. But I can't do my own medical care with my trach because of my CP and spasms. I can thankfully move pretty easily and feed myself once the food is cut up. Everything that I can do online is the easiest for me.
Thank you. Julie, did you want to comment on this?
Yeah, I'll comment really quickly, just kind of jumping off of some of the things that Deanna and Jules have said. I feel like one of the things that's been helpful for me in setting some of those boundaries is just, I feel like under capitalism, and especially doing the type of activist work that so many of us do, it's such a part of our entire lives and work and everything else. Like, those boundaries are hard to find sometimes. It feels like we're all hustling just to make it these days. And when that's the case, and especially when it's work that's really important to you, it's hard to draw those boundaries. And what's been important for me in that is just a kind of a self-separation almost. Like, it was a really interesting process for me to sit down and write the bio for this event, because it forced me to view how I wanted to present myself and my life, and also recognize that there are so many different realms of that. And I think for me, especially over this last year, it's been really important to be like, there's a Julie that no one except my intimate relationships have access to. There's Dr. Williams, there's activist Julie, there's the Julie that teaches yoga, but then there's also this other part of me that I'm going to separate from all of that and keep separate from this like hustling, professional, activist, capitalist mode of being. And for me, that's meant nature. I moved back to Montana and have been able to access nature safely in the pandemic. And that's been huge for me, because I find nature very healing, and that's what I needed during this time. So I've taken to hiking a lot and just building that into my schedule, because it feels so important for my health to have that part of me where I'm like, this is the Julie that's not any of those things. And this is key to who I am and how I exist in the world too.
Thank you so much. I know we have a couple more audience questions, but there is something I would like to talk about. We have about 20 minutes left, and I really feel like we need to address this. So where do we go from here? Is it our job to not only call out ableism, but also to educate others as well? Because what I'm finding is this cycle we're in, where if we don't teach about ableism, we are the best people to teach what ableism is and why it's harmful. But at the same time, it should not be our job to teach about ableism, but yet we have to teach about ableism. So where do we go we're 30 years past the Americans with Disability Act, and yet we have not come very far. I was 13 years old, not even when the Americans with Disability Act became law. I am 43 years old. I will be 44 years old. I don't feel like from my teenage years to my 40s that we've come very far. And a lot of that has to do with ableism and the ableist construct that we live in with society. So where do we go from here? And is it our job? And if it is our job, why is it our job? What do we do? So whoever would like to tackle that first, and we have, like I said, about 15 minutes or so. And I know this is a lot to talk about, but we can at least begin the discussion. So whoever would like to go for Deanna.
Thank you for that great question, Mary. I think for me, my identity is literally like, I view my purpose on the earth to make better to avoid from people having to experience the things that I've experienced. And I'm sure that would resonate with many people of like why we go into this work. So sorry about that loud noise. I just bumped into my table. I think that for me, I want to accept responsibility for working with other people so that we distribute spoons and energy and capacity, and we reimagine what the world can be when we're abolishing many of the things that we are advocating for abolishing right now. I think that for myself, I try to start with my own communities. So I'm in this anti-racist group that is pretty inaccessible. And I've done a few call-in posts about like, hey, we actually are not being anti-racist if we're not also being anti-ableist, because ableism is the root of racism and many other intersecting oppressions. And like, there's Black disabled people too. There's disability intersects every identity. So we really need to care about these things, whether or not we feel directly affected by them. I hope that everyone here, audience members, synchronists watching this in the future, will feel a little bit more responsibility for also joining, but not accepting all of the responsibility yourself. I think that interdependence and collaboration really comes in important for this kind of work. And as we've talked about, we need to make sure that we are balancing so that we maximize wellness for ourselves and minimize pain and things like that. But I think that it's everyone's responsibility. Disabled people and other marginalized people need to be centered, and the leaders of it, everyone needs to work together so that it's not only marginalized people doing this work. And also, this work should be paid, this work should be compensated, and in a way that's mutual aid, not charity, not capitalistic. So for my life, I've felt extremely liberated through anti-ableism, through disability justice as a movement and framework, through surrounding myself pretty much only by disabled people and multiply marginalized people, because we share that access, intimacy, and I feel like we get it, and we all want to contribute to this kind of activism. The question is are each of us learning about these things? And asking those kinds of questions and emailing the schools that we go to, educating the professors that we have. Like, we can start small. Each of us can take little steps and educate. Like, I have this website, my website has a bunch of just like resources that I just want people to know about. I'm like, please. Same with this like event. I hope that more people will be aware of this. Like, what are you all going to do to amplify this as, you know, a resource for people to know about? There's so many things that we can do. We can start small, we can do large, but we really need to work together and not only rely on people most affected to carry the weight. Check.
Thank you so much. Jules, I'm curious as to your response because of neighborhood access and the work that you're doing with neighborhood access, and you know the ableism you might have encountered, and like how you're educating the businesses that you're going into as far as, you know, accessibility and maybe ableist language that you're using. I I really would like your thoughts, and then we'll go to Sean after you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So again, just a little context about what I do. I mentioned earlier, I'm the founder and consulting lead at Neighborhood Access. I work with organizations, community-facing organizations in a variety of different kind of modes. So I'll do everything from, you know, a walkthrough of their physical space to check it out for accessibility and make recommendations, to policy reviews, both internal and external policies, to training staff, to just doing kind of general purpose advocacy training. So it's kind of a wide swath that I cover. And, you know, I think to answer the question, is it our job to be addressing this? I recognize that I think it is my job, and for me personally, and because I say that because I recognize that I am very privileged in terms of disability, being a white person, you know, being able to speak, and all of these other things that benefit me in an ableist society, unfortunately. Train gone. What was I saying? So,
That is your job.
Thank you. That ADHD. I think that because I have not had to put up with as much bullshit, to put it frankly, I think it is my job to, you know, be educating people about this work, because I haven't experienced as much burnout and as much crap from people. So, and I'm still young and I have a long fuse to burn, I guess. I think it's, you know, a lot of the work that I try to do is bringing attention to accessibility issues that aren't always talked about. So a lot of people know, you know, oh, well, only having a staircase isn't accessible, for example. But a lot of people don't know, you know, if you're hosting a conference and you don't have a quiet space where people can go to get away from like the busyness of a huge conference setting, it's not accessible. Or if you are only providing sign language or captions and not both, it's not fully accessible. So there's all of these things that that people just don't know about. And I would say, you know, find the disabled people who are doing this work and uplift them. Not every disabled person wants to be the, you know, shining poster child for advocacy and accessibility or whatever. But I think that there are a number of people who are very, very talented at this work, and who are at the intersection of a lot of different identities as well, because as Deanna said, disability is unique in that it's an identity that can intersect every other identity. And so we have to make sure that the disabled voices that we're hearing aren't just, white, cis, straight, disabled voices. We've got to get everybody in there, because every community and every culture has different needs, and sub-communities within the disability community have different needs. And so what I'm trying to do with neighborhood access, really our structure is, as we've gotten established a little bit over the last year, I'm moving into this idea of hiring out subcontractors for different projects. So if I have a project that, we identify that there's a wheelchair access issue, I'm going to hire a wheelchair user to help me with that project. Or, if I'm working, like I just had this recently, where I am working on a website redesign, and will be hiring out a blind person to screen reader test it and make sure that it really works. So yeah, all of this to say, I think that it is not, we should not put the burden of fixing ableism solely on the shoulders of a few disabled people, or on the shoulders of every disabled person you meet, because that's annoying. But we should be uplifting the people who are already passionate about doing this work, and calling others in, and giving them the resources to do this work if it's something that they're interested in. So yeah. Now I'm excited to hear what Sean thinks about this.
Yes, I'm going to go ahead and move on to Sean. Go ahead.
Here's Sean's response. Mary, we aren't even allowed a night dedicated for us in the Democratic debates. Able bodies are in this dangerous mindset that the ADA is enough when it's not. At the same time, we are just getting into revealing systemic racism. We are still fighting to be seen. The only reason why we are a minority as a disability community is only because we get ignored. We are every other minority and majority combined. Until we can face that fact on a national level, we're not going to get far. Also, I see a question in the chat about the title of my book. As of now, that has yet to be revealed, but it will be out in the next few months.
Thank you, Sean. And you're right. And I know Jules knows and Deanna knows this, because we've had long conversations. Myself as a brown disabled woman, yes, I get a lot of crap. And I don't get the same crap that white disabled people do, because I don't have white privilege. And until the most marginalized of our marginalized community are those that are Black, Indigenous, people of color. And those are the voices that need to be amplified. And the more you try to amplify them, the more pushback you receive. So I agree with everything that has been said. Julie, I will give you a quick minute if you wanted to go ahead and respond.
Sure, thank you. I think that my thoughts on where we go from here is, I agree with what others have said. I also view this as my job. I'm an educator at heart, so I take the opportunities to do that. But I also want to echo some things that Deanna said, that you need to pay people for this work. I've struggled to make ends meet because most of my work is unpaid. And I think that's a problem in the activist community, that we are expected to do this work. And I happily do this. I like educating people. I think that this is important stuff and I want people to know it, but also I want to make a living. So if you're asking people to do this work, you need to be paying them. We are the experts on this topic, and if you're looking for expertise, then that is something you should be willing to compensate for. And I found it a very frustrating process to exist in these circles and be asked for my expertise, but then to have this resistance to paying for that, because I have to make a living too. And I'm happy, like my ideal would be to make a living doing this education work. I would love that, because then I wouldn't have to hustle to find other ways to make income to be able to do this work. So I would ask people that are involved in social justice circles to seek out the experts and compensate them for that. I think that, well, I view this as my job, and it sounds like that's a pretty commonly held belief. I also think that it is the work of non-disabled people to amplify this issue, because I'm tired. I think a lot of us are tired, and we need your help, I think. And that is similar to a lot of the other social justice work going on, is it's not going to happen just in a vacuum with one set of people doing this. This has to be more of a socially recognized thing. So that would be my addition to that.
Thank you, Julie. I agree. We're all tired. We are all tired, especially after the past year. We are exhausted, and we are expected to continue not only to do this work, but to do it for free. So, yes, I agree. Thank you to all who participated and attended today. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to Julie, Brother Brandon, our ASL interpreters. Please complete the exit survey once we have concluded, so that I know how and what to improve for our next roundtable event in April. I will be posting the panelists' PayPal, Venmo, and our Cash App info as we just talk about paying for work. So I was not able to raise enough money to adequately compensate our panelists for their expertise today. So please look at Upgrade Accessibility's Instagram probably tomorrow. I will be posting all of their Cash App, Venmo, all of that, so that they can be compensated for their time and their expertise, which I truly appreciate. Thank you once again, everyone, for attending. I am Mary Fashik, your moderator and founder of Upgrade Accessibility. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you, Mary.